So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about going from a startup to a public company, and probably more importantly, just a big company. Like, whether you go public or not, it probably doesn't matter. But what is that like? And some people don't like working for large companies. They always want to be in a small company. And so, how do you keep that feel? When you go through, when you grow and that kind of thing too. That's really important to everybody. That's something called culture. So we'll talk a little bit about that as I go through. So the interesting thing is I've been pretty fortunate. I've worked with the same group of people, and I've actually been able to do this twice. So we founded a company way back in 1988, probably before some of you were, well, you might have been born, but you were not in this room for sure. And we actually took a company we bootstrapped a company, basically started with $1,000, right out of school, and it was a group of people. It wasn't just me, it was a group of people, and we did an IPO in 1996, and back then it was a dot-com boom, right? So if you had any revenue at all, you could go public, So it was a much easier time to do it, right? But it was still, a pretty big achievement, but we went from 1988 to 1996, and then we went a couple years with, doing great after that, and then we hit one quarter where we missed our revenue target by a little bit, and we lost like 70-80% of our value in 3 days' time. It was a horrible experience to go through, just absolutely horrible. But so I went through that, but it was the whole dot-com, boom and bust cycle that we went through. But it was quite an experience that I went through, and it was a lot of fun. So some of what I'll talk to today is my experience doing that, and then some will be Workiva as well. So we ended up getting bought in 2000 for like a fraction of the money that what we were valued at one point. But it was kind of a cool experience anyway. And with the same group of people, the initial group, we started a company called Workiva, basically in the same place. It was started in Iowa, but I actually lived in Bozeman at the time, even when we started the company here. And just traveled back and forth, and then after a while, just kept building the office here in Bozeman and started one in Missoula as well. But we were founded in 2008, but our product really didn't come out till 2010. And we started selling in 2010. And last year, our revenues got to $145 million. We went public about a year and a half ago, so I've done it twice now, gone public twice. And so I'll give you, what does it take to get there, and some advice along the way, and take it or leave it. But there's a couple things, and more importantly than that, I've got a whole bunch of thoughts that I'm going to throw at you. And I'm going to try to prioritize some of them and tell you which ones I think are more important than others. Otherwise, you'll get the fire hose. So I just have one slide on what our company does, and then I won't talk much about that anymore. But basically, we take structured and unstructured data from a lot of different sources, and we pull that together in our platform, our productivity suite, and we build solutions for customers that they're related to finance and accounting, Sarbanes-Oxley, audit, risk, these things that are super boring to do, right? Big public companies have to do these things. They're a big overhead, and we try to make it easy for companies to do that. But essentially, that's what we do. So we've got a pretty complicated platform and with a lot of capabilities, and we've got to pull all that together in some environment and make it fun to develop in that environment, which is a really tough thing, right? We take this really boring thing, and we try to make it fun for developers. So... but before I get going into what some advice and kind of things we've run into, there's some really interesting stats, and I'll talk a little bit about SaaS companies just for a couple of minutes. That there's about 550,000 companies that are created every year in the U.S. That's a huge number, right? 500,000 companies are created. About roughly 185 of those get to be $100 million in revenue. So every year there's 185 companies that will eventually, maybe 10 years from now, get to be 185 million in revenue. 15 to 20 of those every year are created, they're technology companies, they're software companies, or they're IT companies, right? So growth rate, like today, of all the companies that have started this year, 15 of those in the tech industry will get to be $100 million. And that seems like a lot, but it's like 1 out of every 3,500 companies that are started will make it to that level. And some it might take 5 years, and some it might take 20 years to get there. But that's kind of the notion. Years to $100 million. my CEO put this slide together a while ago, and I added Right Now to this too, because Right Now has done it. And they actually did it in kind of even a more impressive way, because they've sort of bootstrapped their way there. Whereas we did it, we raised a lot of private money to get there and all that kind of thing. But we've gotten there in 5 years since we started selling, and like Salesforce is there in 6 years, and Workday is 7 years, and SAP was 14. Our first company, it took us 12 years to get there, right? So, and we bootstrapped our first company. It took us 12 years. So, but that's how long it takes. I mean, if you're doing a SaaS company, and in particular B2B, it takes that long. Now, consumer companies are different, right? Like you can do it faster. You can get on the viral curve and you can get there quickly. But that's like 1 in a million. But in the business world, in the B2B space, it's a lot different. It's going to take you some time, right? Because you're selling to businesses, and you don't get that viral kind of growth that you would get in a consumer world. So fundamentals of SaaS companies, I think most people know this, right? It takes a lot of upfront money generally if you're going to grow quickly. If you're going to bootstrap, you can do it still, but it's a lot harder and it takes longer. But if you're going to grow quickly, it takes upfront money, and I'll give you some evidence of that in just a second. Obviously the big attraction to SaaS companies is that it becomes an annuity. As long as you can retain your customers, as long as you have good customer satisfaction, you get those customers year after year, and it's more of an annuity for you, and then you just add on new companies as well. So that's a big deal. And I won't go into the rest of this stuff. But I thought this slide was kind of interesting. This is one that when we went public, our bankers put this together for us. And you can't read all this, but I'll give you an idea of what's going on here. And this is like the amount of money that companies raise, like B2B SaaS companies raise before they go public. So this is right when they're ready to go public. Like take a look at Box, for example. They're way over there on the right. They raised almost $550 million in venture capital money or private money. And their revenues at the time were a little under $200 million. So that's how much money you're talking on the table to get to a SaaS company. That whole collection of companies sort of in the lower left corner quadrant over there, and we're included in that, by the way, is companies, how much money that they have raised privately to get to a certain amount of revenue. And it's almost, what was kind of striking to me was it's almost a one-to-one thing, right? So if you're going to go public and your revenues are $50 million, you've probably raised $50 million in capital already before you've gone public. If your revenues are $100 million and you're going to go public, you've probably raised $100 million in capital, if you're growing at this rate. So these were all the companies going public around the same time as we were, within a year or so, and it was kind of striking to me like how much money is involved in getting a SaaS company up and off the ground. Valuation, this is kind of should be a no-brainer to everybody, but these are different companies that are spread out across the way. This should normally be a linear line here. As you get, as you grow at a higher percentage, right? Your valuation should go up as a company, but it doesn't. It actually goes up a little faster, right? So Wall Street, the street values companies that grow faster, at a higher rate, and they give them a higher premium, and that's really what this graph is all about. And then, also I'd say that investors pay for profitability. So everybody with a red box around them, ourselves included, we are not profitable yet, right? So here we've been public for a year and a half. Company's still growing, but we're not profitable yet. So we're below the line a little bit. Pretty much all of the companies in red are below the line, and that's the reason for it, right? So profitability is a big part of it, obviously, and it should be. And it's become even a more important part in the last 6 months. So the pendulum has kind of swung on that as well. And then finally, this is the last slide on this kind of stuff, and then I'll get into, kind of the rest of it. But scale matters. So in SaaS companies in particular, and you guys all know this, right? When you're deploying software, selling another version of it, even in the B2B space where you've got a big sales team, the efficiencies at scale get you to the point where you become more efficient, you become more profitable as you get more and more customers. So that's what this slide is all telling you, and probably isn't a big surprise to anybody. So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk here on lessons learned, like what did we learn getting there, and kind of focus on 3 areas: business, technology, and culture. And culture's probably, might be the most important one of the bunch. But I'm going to go through these 3 things, and I sort of categorized all these. So I had all these ideas and just threw them in a bucket, and they ended up this way. So I'll try to get through these as quickly as I can, but there's some thoughts here. So I'll start with the business stuff first. Lessons learned. The first one's kind of obvious. There's books written on this stuff. There's papers out there, but kill old products. And when you're a startup, you don't have any old products. So it's pretty easy, right? You just do the thing you got to do day after day, and everybody's pretty focused. You don't have any old products. As you start to grow even a little bit, this becomes a big deal. And we had an issue even just ourselves in the last 2 months. We had some kind of medium security. It wasn't even a high-level thing, but it was a low-level thing. That's something that it ended up taking like 4 man-months of developer work to go fix a product that we thought we had pretty much mothballed and didn't have to put any more effort on it. And then it turned up in a security review at some point, and we had to go fix that. And I don't even know the details of it. All I know is it took us 4 man-months of work to go do this thing, right, that I thought we were done with. And so these things come back to haunt you, and they come back to kill you. And getting rid of old products is really, really hard because it might be like 1% of your revenue or something like that, or 2% of your revenue. And the CFO is going to go crazy if you say you want to kill this thing, right? You just don't put any effort on it. Just let it go. But it does take effort. Even the things you let go drag on. So you have to be really active at killing old products. This is probably the hardest thing to do in software development, is to kill these things. Secondly, this one is pretty obvious, and a lot's been written on this too, is you don't want a single large customer. You don't want them, but it's for different reasons. I actually think the reasoning for this is different than what's publicized a lot. So this is our kind of spread of customers. We have over 2,500 companies that use our products. We're pretty fortunate. We've got a huge spread in the industry for a company our size, revenue-wise. We're spread all across different industries, all across different size companies. We've got a lot of, 65% of the Fortune 100 companies that use us, but still a lot of small companies use us. And so we're spread all over the place. We don't have any single customer that's over 1.5% of our revenue. I think we're well under that even. And so we don't have to worry about a single large customer. But in our previous company, we did. We shipped software, and so GM and Ford were our 2 largest customers, 2 automotive companies. And together we had a quarter where I think they accounted for almost 25% of our revenues. That's kind of scary, right? So you've got 2 customers. If any one of them drops out, you lose 15% of your revenue. And that's the reason everybody gives you for not wanting a big customer, is there's a lot of risk there, right? So, but the risk isn't the big thing. Like, the big thing for me was always, being on the development side, was always that they would come back to you with, hey, I got this feature that I really want, and I really want this feature. And, you can't say no, right? Like this becomes really difficult for you. And before long, this becomes a death spiral, right? You start building these little features that, you can kind of justify, maybe another customer will use it also, but they don't really, right? So you start adding that stuff into the product, and before long, you've kind of augured in. So large customers, it's not really the risk profile that I think is the most troubling part of that. It's really the fact that they've got leverage over you, and they can start to force your hand at building, custom features for them. So stay away from that as you start to grow as much as possible. The other thing is, have a relationship with your customers. And we kind of learned this at our last company also, was you really, if you're in the consumer space, this isn't a big deal, right? You're just going to sell on the web and don't worry about it, right? But if you're in the B2B space, if you're selling to companies and you've got a sales force, you need to be the person shaking the person's hand who's signing the check. And we learned this the hard way at our other company as well, where we did a good chunk of our revenue was done through third parties. And so we were kind of beholden to them to bring the revenue in, and it was real easy for them to start to squeeze us and say, oh, well, we paid you, $5 million last year. This year it's going to be $4 million, and you take it or leave it, and that's the kind of stuff that starts to happen, right? So really in the business space, in the B2B world, you really want to own your customers. You want to be the person shaking the hand there. This one's an obvious one, right? It's easier to keep a customer than get a new one. This is particularly important in the B2B space where sales, it can be a big deal to get a customer. In the consumer world, it's not a big deal, right? You're trained to do this all the time. But in B2B, this is extremely important. Know what your retention rate is. Do everything you can to keep customers. Look at these quotes that we have up here. I can have dinner with my family again. WDES saved my marriage, which I love. I can finally think about having a family. I mean, someone's actually thinking about having a family because of software that these are actual quotes from our customers. We have pages of these things. We call them customer success managers, but and this isn't by accident, right? It's not just because we write decent software. It's because we also spend a lot of money and energy having a really good customer success team. So we have people, when they have to go do a filing, they actually have the phone number of the same person they talk to every time. They can call them 24/7 and say, hey, I've got to put this filing with the Security and Exchange Committee, tomorrow at 4:35 p.m. I need you to be available, and I've got an issue, or I need some help, and how you would arrange this thing. And they can call them 24/7. This is a big deal for people. During filing season for us, we get, our customer success team, there's you walk through that area, and there's like flowers that show up everywhere. There's candy and everything that comes in from our customers. That's how much they appreciate customer service. So this is a big deal. We spend a lot of time and we spend a lot of money on it, and it pays off in the long run. This is why it's good. So retention rate, our retention rate is 96.1%. That's what it was last year. That's pretty high. Mergers and acquisition take up most of that 4% that we lose. We rarely lose a customer, and it's because we spend a huge amount of energy on it. And it's so hard to get a new customer, you don't want to lose one. And the same amount of effort should go into losing one as it does to go get a new one. So this is a big deal. This one, don't let your CFO run the company, okay? So this is all about, starting to just count the beans, the bean counter thing, right? We've got a great CFO, and he's pretty understanding, right? But in the end, if you delight the customer, you're going to make money, and that, there's a lot of truth to that. You hear that thing over and over again, but when push comes to shove and someone's telling you got to cut, R&D expenses down, or, make that smaller, got to get to a smaller percentage. There is an awful lot of truth to just build the great product, make sure there's good value there, and then put the onus on the rest of the company to say, hey, we've got great value coming out here. How do we package that and make money on it? So as you grow, this becomes a big deal, and it's really important. So tech stuff. Okay, so we did the business stuff. I'm going to go into tech stuff. I Googled this on Google Images, and for some reason, like green toilet paper kept coming up under tech stuff. I don't know if that's something, is that a new thing? I'm not familiar with that, but I thought I'd throw it in here anyway. So I was kind of amazed. But this one should be obvious, right? Start simple. Monolithic if you have to, right? A monolithic piece of software. And I think this can be hard if you've hired a head developer that has come from a large company, right? Because they want to design the Uber system right out of the chute, right? And so, my advice to you is don't do that. Don't try to build a Uber system right out of the beginning. Build something small, something maintainable, make it a monolithic system, whatever it has to be, but something that you can maintain. You're trying to understand what your product should be early on, right? You're not trying to design the big thing. So it's very, very likely that you don't know what the product should be when it goes out of the door, and you're going to have to change it. So if you put a lot of energy into it, you're probably going to end up changing it. So don't do that. Don't start off with a big microservice architecture that you're going to have to maintain, and it's going to be a pain. It's going to be a painful process for you if you do. Start with a platform as a service if you can. If at all possible, start with this. We started with Google App Engine when we got going. It allows us to scale horizontally. We went from, our very first customer to, 2,500 companies that use us without having to do anything on the horizontal scaling front, just because we used a platform to do that. And we've since been moving off of that because we need more specific capabilities. But if you can start on a platform, you're going to be way better off than like doing all that work yourself. Infrastructure is hard. It is really, really hard, right? I mean, like just standing up a server and running it is easy, but if you start to scale, holy cow, like that's where things really get bad. Now it's an order of magnitude easier than it was 5 years ago. You know, Amazon has gotten really good at this. Google has gotten good at this. Microsoft has gotten good at this. But it is still a lot of effort. If you can start with a platform, you're going to be way better off. Like and it's not just because it's hard to do. It's because you're going to take your best engineers and you're going to put them on infrastructure, because that's what it's going to take to keep the infrastructure going. So you're going to lose the best people that should be writing your product. They're going to go to infrastructure support. So that's real reason why you want to start with platform if you can. Multi-tenant, of course, is great as well. So basically being able to serve multiple customers on the same platform or on the same container or whatever it happens to be. But the noisy neighbor problem can be a big deal. So I think most of you are familiar with that, but it's like, like if one customer, if they really sort of start to overwhelm your servers, if they can somehow affect your other customers, you've got a noisy neighbor problem. I mean, it can also be a problem where most of the time it may come from your platform. Unfortunately, we just talked about it goes against the grain of using a platform, right? If you use a platform, the downside to that is some of those shared services can now start to bleed over into, like a Netflix can influence my customers, right? Like that shouldn't happen, but in fact, that has happened in the past to us, where Netflix, and I use that as an example because Netflix has affected our own customers at different times. And that's because Google or Amazon or those companies might have noisy neighbor problems themselves, some of their shared services. So if you know how that stuff works and you can live with that, it's a big deal, but you're going to have to deal with these noisy neighbor problems. So, and then again, back to simplicity is start with your version of Hello World. And do this in production, by the way. Don't just do it on a laptop. If I see it on a laptop from our developers, I hate that. It's like, okay, has that been released yet? No, it hasn't. It's not a real thing until it gets out and it's been deployed. And when I say hello world, this is everything. This is the client server piece of it, right? It's really the plumbing of how your pieces are going to talk to each other, which is really critical to get that early. Like stub in the main stuff, right? Like stub in everything else and get the main components running first. Get it all out there, and then get it deployed. Get it out in some form of continuous deployment. And there's a million forms out there, and we can have a week-long discussion on what's the best way to do this. But just start iterating on things. But get that Hello World app that you're building and get it out there. Deploy it again. Get really good at it. So continuous deployment is how you're going to succeed. I mean, your chance of success goes up dramatically. This is why everybody does Agile today, right? Like everybody talks about Agile development, right? That's like iterating on things. That's like iterating on the product, but you can't really iterate on the product if you can't deploy it. So if it's just iterating amongst yourselves, that will definitely help you, but it's not going to really do it. You got to be able to do this on a regular basis. So at our old company back in the 90s, continuous deployment meant CDs. You guys remember what CDs are? So we actually would do one of these, and we were like state of the art back then. So we'd have a CD, and we shipped it every friggin' 3 months. We would ship a CD. That was pretty awesome. Like most companies were doing 6 months or a year. We were doing it every 3 months, and we really thought we were something, right? So, but there's a huge amount of overhead to that, right? Because you bundle up all of this stuff that you've done in 3 months of work, and it's got to be tested, right? Because if you make a mistake, there is no recourse, right? And then you ship this stuff out to all of your people, all of your companies that use your product. And again, it's not a big deal on consumer stuff. But when we started the new company, it was the same sort of mentality, right? And we didn't use CDs, right? We deployed software, but instead of 3 months, we thought we were good. We'll do it every 2 months. We'd ship software every 2 months. So we started shipping software every 2 months. And then invariably what happened was Okay, we shipped software in 2 months with all this stuff in it, and then a week later, we'd send out the emergency patch that goes out with it, right? Like, oh, yeah, well, we made some mistakes. The emergency patch goes out 2 weeks later. Okay, and then, we said, oh, that's ridiculous. There's so much stuff in the 2-month cycle. Let's get it down to a month. So we got it down to a month, and then the emergency patch went out. But then we got the emergency patch out in 2 days instead of a week, right? And then we got it down to 2 weeks, and then the emergency patch was 1 day later. And then pretty soon we said, why are we doing an emergency patch? Let's just keep reducing this down. This is all about QA. It's all about release management. Do you trust your release process? So, get it down to a point where you can release, every day. This is kind of our release cycle. If we look at the last couple of years for us, where we've gone, these are a number of releases over the last 6 months. So we're over the last 6 months, and this is a little older now, but we've done, 400 releases. This is to production. This is not to, we've got our testing sites too, which, that's 10 times this number of releases, right? But this is actually to productions, to customers. And we have some of the most sensitive customers in the world, by the way, right? Like, they're about to file with the Security and Exchange Commission, and if they're wrong, they can literally go to jail if they screw up. So they're very, very sensitive about when we release. But we release every day, and in fact, this comes down to, we'll put out about, roughly 4 production releases of some service every day for us today now. I will be shocked in 6 months if this doesn't quadruple from where we're at now, because we've put so much more stuff on microservices that we'll be doing probably 4 times the number of production releases in 6 months. So if you're not good at continuous development, it's going to be tough. It all comes down to testing, right? You've got to have your unit tests in place and testing efficiency. So if you're putting energy anywhere, I guess what I'm telling you is this release cycle, testing efficiency, we've gotten much good at this. We're putting out way more releases than we used to. It's going up exponentially, and our testing efficiency has gotten way better. So it's actually costing us less money to test, and we've just gotten more targeted. We know now when we make a change to a code what it affects. We don't have to test everything. We don't have to do this full frontal test on the whole thing. We can do it on pieces of it. And so you get good at this over the run. So the cost goes down. So this is, I got a few more things to say here still, but this is the one idea. If you listen to nothing else I've said today, nothing else at all, this is the one idea I want you to take away is continuous deployment is your chance of success skyrockets. Okay, just spend your energy on this. Don't worry about everything else I say, but everything else you can forget about. You can go to sleep now if you want, but this is the main thought, right, is do this. And I will tell you this, that if you've got a competitor and they're starting to eat your lunch, I will guarantee you they're doing this, and I will guarantee you they will pass you by. A company that's really good, that's kind of scary, is Google, right? I mean, Google is, I love Google. I think they're a tremendous company, but they're also kind of scary because they're kind of taking over the world in a lot of ways. Facebook's on the same front, right? Those two companies, if you look at what's consistent about them, is they release often. They release consistently. I've got an Android phone. I don't know if you got an Android or Apple, but most of the apps that come out now, they're all Google apps. They get, I get automatic updates from Google apps. It feels like I'm getting 3 releases a week on Google Photos. Like, how can a company that size do that, be that nimble, right? But that's what it's about, is releasing often, and just get into that mode. You got to do it. This is where all the competition's going. So put all your wood behind this arrow. Don't customize, should be obvious by now, but keep a single deployed version stack. I didn't want to say a single version out there because, if you get into the general release cycle and you want to, release a version of it and just do the, 5% of the customers on that, that's kind of what we're doing now, and you want to do that kind of thing, right? But you don't want to put out different releases, and you don't want to customize. And that means features too. I talked a little bit about that too. So don't customize features. If you do, it's a black hole. Just don't go down that path. Refactoring code is easy. Data models are hard. So where do you spend your energy? Put your energy on making sure up front that you model whatever data you're going to do. Do that. Spend your energy there. Make sure you get the data model right first, right? The code refactoring part of it, how you get that data to the data model, you're going to refactor that anyway. You're going to redo that 2, 3, 4 times. I hate to tell you that. You guys know that by now too, right? That's going to happen, but it's expensive to change the data model, and it's harder, and you got to migrate data, all that kind of thing. So you can probably make small changes. You're probably all set up to do that, but kind of major refactoring on the data model is tough. So put your energy behind the data model, not on the code refactoring. This is a big one. Depending on what kind of an app you've got or what kind of services you provide, put limits on everything. We didn't do that. We didn't do a lot of this. We were bad at this. We were terrible at this. So, and we learned the hard way to put limits on anything, because you build an app and you know how you want your customers to use it, right? And so it's built for that. And we even built it so it's 10x that size, right? It's gonna handle that no problems, right? Until you get to something like this, right? Like this is a graph. This is actually from one of our customers, and what it represents is every one of those little dots. Like there's we have one product that's it's like an Excel spreadsheet kind of thing, right? But we can link data from there to someplace else, or you can do it with formulas. So when I change one cell, then it starts to affect something else, which starts to affect something else, which starts to affect something else, and something else, and with our product, even, we can go beyond a single spreadsheet. You can go into other documents as well. So, it turns out we call these things magic cells now. You change one thing, and it can spider out and touch 1 million or 2 million or 3 million other items pretty easily. And it can spider out, and it can affect 50 or 100 documents. And it got to the point where it would start to bring our systems down. When people did these things that we did not expect them to do, we didn't put limits on it. And it turns out this particular problem is a hard one to solve technically, so it took us a couple of years to get really good at this. But, and we still, even to this day, once in a blue moon, we struggle with something new. One other thing that our customers did, which was a crazy thing, was we didn't support foreign languages at the time, right? So we had a customer in Europe that took one of our spreadsheets, and they basically did a lookup table, which is not a big deal, right? They just took English words and they tried to do a lookup table to French. So they tried to build their own French translator in our product, which is not exactly what we had intended. And then they built documents off of that, and then they would do these massive V lookups to do every single word in a massive document, and that thing would spider out into all over the place. So we're not exactly a translator company, but this company used us for translation services, which was nuts, and it actually brought down a system that was designed for formulas because they were doing, translation. So put limits on things. Next thing, everything is going to fail. You guys know this, right? So count on it, plan on it. And this is not just your own code, right? You make RPCs, right? How is it going to fail? When's it going to fail? It's also the hardware is going to fail. Google's going to fail. Amazon's going to fail. Microsoft is going to fail at some point. You see those stories all the time. The question is how you deal with it when it fails. So, when you go click that button and boom, Amazon goes down or Google goes down, boom, right when you're pushing the button, this collection of things, if it's supposed to be, transactionally consistent, if all of these things are supposed to, either fail together or not happen together, make sure you're thinking that through early. We got into a lot of trouble early on in our cycle where we hadn't thought those issues through, where we didn't have transactional consistency on a lot of operations. We'd get into a failure mode, and boy, debugging that stuff, figuring out where those problems were, that is really, really hard, and it takes your best engineers weeks or even months to figure that stuff out. So, and it doesn't happen very often, right? But when it does, it's like catastrophic. So these things that don't happen very often, you don't think about, you gotta deal with them early, because they will kill you when you're in the throes of production. And you got customers calling you and saying, hey, something's wrong with my data. That's the biggest thing. You can handle any other kind of failure, but a data problem, it's really tough to talk to a customer through that. It gets even harder when you get to microservices. That's one of the reasons you want to stay monolithic or stay, you don't have to be monolithic, but stay small early on. Microservices make this exponentially harder to deal with, right? You send a request into a client, and it spiders out into 10 different services. Something's not going right here, so how have you tracked that through? You know, do you have a transaction ID that you're tracking through that whole process or not? Can you debug it? It gets really hard with microservices. So if you bite off that whole thing right at the beginning of a new company, boy, that's a lot of work. So be really careful there. So start early with logging analytics. You can mine that data later. So, you know, this is a no-brainer today. It used to be a lot of work to do analytics. It used to be a lot of work to do logging. Today, it's cheap. It costs almost nothing. It's easy to do. There are a lot of tools out there. So hopefully everybody's doing this well, but keep the data. It doesn't mean you have to be really good at machine learning right out of the chute, right? You can come back and you can mine information out of that data later on, but don't put your money behind machine learning right out of the beginning, unless that's your product, right? But you know, jump in here and just start on analytics right out of the chute. How many people know where hacks are in their code? No one's admitting it here? A couple, yeah. They're there. Everybody's got them, right? Everybody has hacks in the software someplace. They're out there. Everybody's got them. Every company has them. Google's got them. Amazon's got them. Facebook has them. They're there. Just keep them out of your core stuff. If you go to bed at night and you know, hey, I put that little note in the documentation that says this is a hack, I'll fix this later. If it's in the core, go back and fix it. You know, don't let that stuff languish. But it's okay to have it in, you know, the ancillary stuff, right? Everybody's got it there, but just don't let it in the core. The big refactor comes 5 to 7 years, right? If you start monolithic or wherever that is, you're going to end up doing this major refactor. We're kind of in the midst of this now. You know, we call it Gen 2 at our company, and we've come pretty far along. Depending on how complicated your software and how much functionality is, this is a multi-year effort at some stage. And it can be a lot of fun, actually. I kind of enjoy it. But, you know, first thing is just admit to yourself that it's going to happen. It's not a mistake, right? It doesn't mean that the first thing you did was a mistake. It was probably right for the period of time when you started. It just means you're at another phase and you got to go through this thing. And every 5 to 7 years, that's probably going to happen. So it won't be as big the next time because you'll probably, once you get into microservices and things, it's going to be easier, but you're still going to have to do it. So, you know, keep that in mind and just admit to it, pull the trigger, make sure the CEO knows about it, and you're off and running, right? And lastly, on the tech stuff, it is, you know, there's so much information out there that is so good. You know, like, there's no problem that you're running up against that somebody hasn't solved already. So read the blogs, watch the videos. There's plenty of material out there. I have a note in here, like, don't do it. No, you know, Google and Facebook, they've got tons of really great stuff, but guess what? They also have tons of money, right? Like, Google has an entire data center devoted just to their build system, right? Like, I'm guessing you don't have that kind of money. We don't have anywhere near that kind of money, right? So you're not going to adopt all the processes that they have out there, but there's tons of good material out there. So make sure that you're spending at least a percentage of your time reading and watching videos. That sort of thing is really, really important. And by the way, I've got a list of things at the end of this, reference materials that, you know, things that some people in our company feel are really good. You know, you can take that home and watch some of those. So Bo Lidden helped me with that. So you guys know those would be good. People at our company. So, okay, let's get into culture stuff a little bit. This is probably kind of the most important thing, especially when you're growing, right? Like, when you get into a startup, you're there because you really like that atmosphere. Like, I love that, just how it feels to be in a startup, right? Everybody's in the same room. It's like we're going, like we're all pulling on the same rope. And when you grow, you know, how do you maintain a culture like that's fun, you know, because it's not going to be entirely the same, and it can't be almost by definition, but it needs to be fun, right? So the culture probably needs to change a little bit, but hopefully it changes in a fun way. So the first thing I'll say is communication, right? As you grow, when you have one office, you're a startup, it's easy, right? We're all in the same room. Hey, throw me that, you know, eraser or whatever it is, right? It's a piece of cake to do communication when you're small. When you get, you know, 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 teams, it's not a big deal. We've got 35 teams of people that we deal with now. So, and you know, someone like an Oracle or those guys, I don't know how you guys deal with that. Like, it's amazing, right? But communication is hard. We have We have blogs that our guys write, our team writes. We have videos we put out. We started a podcast a couple of months ago, where we put out a podcast every week. We have company meetings once a quarter. We have R&D meetings. We have a big sort of offsite thing that we do for the developers once a year as well. And guess what? We still are not good at it. We did an engagement survey a while ago. We sent out like 37 different questions, 37 different areas, and all we were trying to do this was all about culture, because it's really important to us. So how do we maintain the culture of the company? We wanted to get a feel. We wanted to track this. So I wanted to track the culture. What's it like this year? What's it like next year? If things start to go down, we need to fix it, right? And we were off the charts in most places. We were in the high 80s, low 90s. The company that does this kind of thing for us, they came back and said, wow, you guys are way better than, you're doing fantastic. People love to work at your company. It's a good thing. We made it in a lot of different surveys and all that kind of stuff. It was great. But communication, you probably can't read this very well, but that top overall bar up there is 45%. So everything else was up in the high 80s, low 90s, communication 45%. The sort of lighter color blue is the tech industry average down there. They're below us, right? So this is our problem child area, is communication, and it will be for you too if you grow at all. It is for everybody. It doesn't matter. This is something you just have to keep working on, and just don't give up on it, because everybody thinks communication is a problem. And it's not an excuse not to do any more work, right? Because you do have to do more communication, but as you get more people, you get more offices and all that kind of thing, this becomes a big deal. Okay, new engineers. I'm not going to say much about this other than just get into production code early. When you get a new engineer in, don't put them on a project that they don't have any responsibility for. Facebook's famous at this, right? They try to get a new engineer to put something out in production code on their first day if they can do it. So get somebody in early, because you want those people to maintain that code and know what that whole process is like, know what the release management process is like. And by the way, have them own their own code. Don't let it just QA will fix any problems you got. Make them own their code. If you put code out, you should own it. Autonomy, and I got micromanage here in the Jason's giving a talk here in a little bit. He can talk to me about micromanaging, right? There's no easy way to have this discussion, but this is probably, next to continuous delivery, this is the most important thing. You want to be able to partition as you grow. When you're small, this is not a problem, right? It's all easy. You're all together. But as you grow, you got to partition off areas of responsibility that you can actually give to somebody and they can own. And it's tough, because as a manager or someone like me that walks around, I still want to know what's going on, right? And I want to know some of the details. And so there's this thing, if you go and talk to someone, we have a kind of a standing joke in our company. If I go and get a coffee, if I go to the same place that someone else is getting a coffee, and you ask somebody a question of, hey, how's it going? What's that new thing you're doing? And that conversation gets too deep, all of a sudden it's a micromanagement thing, right? It's viewed as a micromanagement thing. I view it as, hey, I take an interest in what you're doing, but it can easily be viewed as a micromanagement on the other end. And some things, I'll just say I'm guilty. I do, it's impossible for me not to micromanage a little bit. And I think, people that really care, it's hard to divorce yourself from it. But I think that what's helped us a lot is to add clear responsibilities for areas, make sure that that not just management knows who that is, but the entire company knows who owns this area. For us, it might be a data platform, or it might be components and frameworks. We know who owns that in our company, right? We know who owns infrastructure. We know who owns certain product lines. Those are clear ownerships, and they have clear responsibilities, and that helps an awful lot. Org changes should be part of your culture, and And by this, I don't necessarily mean like constant, like changing who you report to, that sort of thing. We have a matrix deal that we do. Anytime you have platform and you have product, you're going to have a matrix organization of some sort, different responsibilities. But you should just be constantly telling yourself, we can do better, right? Like the organization isn't quite right. Something's not quite right there. We need to reorganize. These two product lines don't quite match up. We should shift them. People should expect that. Like it shouldn't be this monstrous thing that comes out where people think about reorg. Oh my gosh, what's happening, right? This should just be a constant flow from you where you're constantly changing things. I've got a picture of Urs Holz up here, who is the number 8 employee at Google. And he's up here because we've had, we use Google services a lot. We use Google App Engine quite a bit in our company. And so Urs, we've had a number of opportunities to sit down with Urs and talk to him. And he told us an interesting story of one time he was talking to Larry Page, and he just told Larry, hey, he's in charge of all infrastructure, by the way, at Google. I mean, everything. I mean, just making everything sing, right? So, and he tells Larry, hey, everything's going well right now. We're doing everything we need to do. Is there something I can help? You want me to go to another part of the organization and help out? And Larry said, yeah, we need some help on the App Engine front right now. They're running into some problems that's not scaling very well. Can you? And Urs said, yeah, I'll do it. So just, like a week later, he's involved in Google App Engine, and he's trying to fix all those problems and get them going. And this is not a big deal. It's just something that's expected, even at a very, very large company like that, right? So I thought that was kind of an interesting story of even a large company just keeping that mentality of keeping those structures going. Obviously, Google has gone through a lot of big changes with the whole Alphabet thing and all of that stuff. And Nest, by the way, it's just having their problems. Objectives and key results. How many people use those OKRs? Any? Not too many. When you're small, you don't need them. You're lined up, right? Like you got your thing you're doing, and it's not a big deal. As you grow, this is critical. This is the only tool that we have found to be effective for lining everybody in the company. It allows you to keep autonomy to those areas we talked about, but still get company alignment. Like this is what's important to the company, these 3 objectives. And boy, we fight this every quarter, right? It's a tough thing to do. It's a lot of work to do OKRs. And objectives are really about what are the main objectives we're trying to hit as a company? How does that translate to R&D? How does that translate to each of the departments in R&D? And then key results are things that they measure themselves by, right? So, it's actually got a number associated with it. At the end of the quarter, I can say yes or no, did I make this, or did I get 70% of the way through or something, right? That's what OKRs are all about. If you don't know much about it, look it up. As you grow, this is the most effective way I've found to keep in sync with things and to really align the company. And it's probably the most productive tool that we've used. Stay on the technology curve. This is a cultural thing, right? Like, expect to be the best. Don't expect. I hate a product or an app that we have that it's like, oh, it's the 3rd best out there. Like that's just like, let's kill it. I don't want to be the 3rd best at anything, right? Like, be the best at what you're doing. Aim for the best, and that includes technology. And for more than one reason, right? This allows you to keep your best people if you're staying on top of the technology curve, right? These are things that are of interest to them. They're of interest to me, frankly. It's like I'm not interested in being, second class. So, and I think most of the people at our company are not interested in that, or they wouldn't be there. And in fact, when you get stagnant and you don't invest in technology, you're going to lose your best people. You're going to keep the same number of people. You'll hire some more B players, and you'll be fine with that, and guess what? You'll be another B company. But if you want to be really good, this is a tough one because it means you're refactoring all the time, right? You're always adding new stuff, but it's a big one for us, culturally for us, is to stay on that technology curve. And don't let anything run open loop. And what do I mean by that is, this is one of my pet peeves, is to not have any system. I don't care what it is. It could be QA. It could be, development. It could be the whole R&D org itself, like run without some independent source coming in and looking at it from time to time. And I hate to say independent consultants because it doesn't have to be. It can be internal. It can be, like one thing we did with our QA organization was our head of QA, Travis, he had his team, go around and look at all the teams that were doing QA and how they were doing it, how they were organizing tests, and just taking a fresh look at everything. And figured out, hey, they ended up like just doing that one thing, like reduced our number of tests down by 3/4, something, some incredible number of testing went, just came right down the pipe, right? Just because they had an independent source, even within their own organization, walk around and independently look at that. So what can you do from time to time to do that? We do the same thing in our org, by the way. We have a couple of consultants that I like. One of them's Marty Kagan that comes in and consults with us from time to time, and he's really great person, and I trust him a lot. But he comes in and he criticizes me and he criticizes our org, right? So he comes in and say, Jeff, you're doing a really shitty job over here in this area, and I say, oh, come on, it's not that bad, and sometimes I agree with him, and sometimes I don't, but more often I do. Because he takes an independent look at you. So it's tough to come in because anytime you're trying to close a loop, you're basically inviting criticism for something. But you have to do that, right, to get better. So it's the constant improvement thing that you got to do, and we tend to do a lot of that. Let good ideas run, but watch them like a hawk. So. You have people in the org that, like, our best products, our best new things have come from new ideas that people come up. Sometimes they're out in full frontal. Sometimes they're called 10% time. Sometimes they're whatever they are. Like, people love to do these things. I got this great idea, let it run. If it looks like a good idea, let it go for a while. Let it go. But you also got to watch them. And I've messed this up on more than one occasion. And in one case, I think we lost 2 of our best engineers for 9 months that went on a project that we ended up killing. And, I should have killed it at 3 or 4 months, and I didn't. And that was my responsibility to do that. But that stuff will happen. But let these good ideas go. This is another cultural thing to keep good people, right, is when they come up with a good idea and they're excited about something, they're going to work, they're going to be really focused on it, and they're going to work well, and it's probably going to be your next big thing for the company. That's where all of the next big things for the company come, by the way, are these good ideas that come. Could be a junior engineer, it could be an intern that comes in with this great idea, but let those things run. Product passion. Okay, this ties in with the micromanagement stuff too, right, Jason? So, Steve Jobs, everybody knows Steve Jobs was famous at that, right? What I really believe is that the person in charge of a product or a product line or whatever that is, they have to really care about the product. I mean, really care. I mean, not the business care kind of thing. Like, okay, it's making a profit, we're doing this, let's cut the people. Like, if they're not the person, like, to give you an example on the platform side of it, if I have someone that comes to me and says, oh, this service call is taking, 785 milliseconds, but I think I can get it down to, like 222. I know how to do that. I'm going to do that. Like, if they come to me and tell me that, I feel really good. I feel confident they're going to do it. On the product side, it's the same thing. If they're coming to me and telling me either some interaction really sucks or, that they're having a problem in one area, but they're working to fix it, I feel good about it. If they're not using the product, and they're only focused on, this is how we position the product and all that kind of thing. That's a marketing, for me, that's product marketing. That's a needed thing. It's very critical for the company, but they shouldn't be building the product. Like, the person, building the product has got to be literally using it every day, acting like a user, and really care about every pixel on the screen. And if you're not doing that, you shouldn't be head of a product. You shouldn't be running a product. This slide, I'm almost done, so we'll get here. This one, I put this in, I threw it out, I put it in, I threw it out again. I finally decided to leave it in. Like, we're all tech people here, right? No one here should trust your feelings, right? Everything should be data, all that kind of stuff, right? But what I've found is, and it feels like, every couple of years or 18 months or something starts to feel wrong. And I can't even put my finger on what it is normally. I start losing sleep over something. Like I feel like, okay, we're just kind of going through the paces. Like I really hate that. The culture is starting to change or whatever it happens to be. And I don't let those things sleep. I don't let them just go because I think that's a bad thing. And so I've realized, and this is out of a lot of years doing this, right, is I realized I wanted to figure out, is it just me? Do I have a problem? Or I start asking some of the key leaders in the company that are working on a product or are really in tune with the organization. And I go around, I ask people, I say, something feels wrong to me. Like, what do you think? And invariably it comes back, yeah, I was thinking the same thing too. And usually it's over a beer that this happens, right? Like something just doesn't feel, and then we kind of get to the bottom of what it is. And we just did this recently, and I was losing sleep, 5 months ago. And this is how our latest org restructure came as a result of this. It just started feeling wrong. It just feels wrong. So this is kind of a crazy slide to put up here. This is one where there probably aren't a lot of papers out there, right? You're not going to find a lot of blog posts about this, but it's trust your feelings is the big thing. Like if something's feeling wrong, if you feel like you're not having fun, and that's the big thing, right? Is if things aren't fun, like let's figure out what's wrong. And that can be in your group or it can be in the whole org, right? So, but as you grow, it's going to happen because culturally, there's this natural tendency to shift things more to be a little more formal, and people in our company know that. But I hate that. Like I'm not a formal guy, right? So there's certain things that I have to do in my job title, and I'm not good at them. And so we have people that are good at those, and they do them for me. So because I just relinquish that responsibility to other people because it's not fun for me to do those things. So. This is a big deal, right? If something feels wrong, like fix it. This is my last slide here, grit, okay? And this has actually become a term now in the tech industry, right? It didn't used to be, and I like this one. And it's particularly relevant, I think, for the Midwest and the Mountain West like this, where, it's like some people call it work ethic or whatever you want to call it too, right? This is our big advantage over Silicon Valley in a lot of ways, right? Is that we keep at it. We screw up, we keep at it, right? So you're going to mess up, start over, redo something, refactor something, whatever it is. If you have grit and you're doing, continuous deployment, if you're doing those two things, you're going to be successful, right? In the end, you'll just get to where you need to go. And whenever I lose sleep at night, this is what I think about: is I can outlive anybody. I can outgrit anybody, I feel like I may not be the smartest guy out there, but I feel like this is something that we do really well as a company, and these are the kind of people that we hire. And so, in Silicon Valley, you worry, okay, like every 6 months, if something feels wrong, boom, your best people are gone. They walk next door to the company next door to them, and I feel like we don't have that here. There's a lot of grit. There's a lot of work ethic that goes on, and to me, this is a big thing. It's that kind of stick-with-itness is another name for the same thing. But that's the big thing. So that's kind of the end of my talk. And I have a bunch of references here that are blogs and talks that I think will be on the site, so you can go look to. These are all ones that I think are really good, and some of the people in our company have recommended. So there's some really good blogs here to go take a look at. Every one of these is better than any talk I could give. So take a couple of days and just kind of go through this stuff. And I guess that's it. So just questions after that. And I think I'm pretty much on time. We started a little late, so I'm good. So any questions, comments?